Hi everyone, thanks for joining us today for the first online edition of the Viantis Enterprise Days. I'm Anthony from the marketing team at Viantis in France, and I'm delighted to see you here. The session will start in a few seconds, but I first wanted to share with you some practical information. As you may have noticed, we'll all be in mute mode during the presentation, so you can't talk to us directly. However, I invite you to use the chat box to leave your comments and your questions, as there will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation. Finally, as some of you may have understood, this session has been pre-recorded to avoid any technical problems or last-minute cancellation. But we will be in live at the end to answer your questions with the speakers. Thanks again for your participation, and see you right after.
Thank you, Anthony, for the introduction. Good morning, everybody. I'm really happy to be here at this event with Valiance. Most companies today really aren't prepared for what's around the corner. And what do I mean? Well, I mean that they're not ready to serve the consumers, the consumers, the employees, and the business models that are basically rewriting the technical needs and the way we deliver services and software and products to them. So consumers will rely more and more on mobile devices. We know that already. They will be willing to experiment more with products and services that we might provide them with, and if from a B2B buyer, from a business-to-business buyer perspective, we expect that they will require more transparency from the vendors, more transparency on the products, on the pricing. Your workers and employees, their workers and their employees will want more flexibility in where and from and what to work on and from where, especially with the pandemic. I think that's been now a growing requirement. We'll see more automation, and given the pace of change, clients will want to modify their products, their services very quickly, depending on the business needs, and that means also shifting operating models. Now, we are in the pandemic. We know that, of course, fortunately still in the middle of it. And what we've seen is that companies are in one of these three bucket areas, right? Either in survival mode, meaning some of you are struggling with revenue contractions and finding themselves basically working every day to kind of survive. That means experiencing significant revenue corrections. The adaptive mode folks are more in a kind of you're being disrupted in some of your business areas, but in others you're actually having some better responses from the products and services and minor disruptions and even uptake in the business, while there's a 13% that are in total growth mode because of the current crisis offering them new ways and new business models, and they're already ready to deliver in that approach. Now, what everybody talks about is, well, we're seeing digital accelerating during the pandemic. It is true. It's something we hear too. I mean, Satya Nadella, basically during the pandemic at the Microsoft Build conference, told developers that we've seen 2 years worth of digital transformation happen in just a very short period of time, in a couple of months. But despite the pandemic, what we still see is that, of course, while we or vendors or clients are not yet seeing what's happening behind the corner, what a constant is that customer needs are still a top priority. So business leaders are focusing on customer needs, saying that this is it's all about customer centricity and customer centricity, and therefore an objective of addressing the needs of customers anticipating the needs of customers in the next 24 months. Unfortunately, though, despite all that happening, they also feel that they are underinvested in technology. And I think the pandemic made this very very clear, I guess, to some organizations, right? Some organizations were almost ready and quickly were able to adopt new technologies or had the technologies already available. Some other didn't. But largely speaking, this is a good opportunity for CIOs and IT leaders to go back to the business table and say, well, you know what? We need to invest in technologies as the pandemic has proven. And we did this study with Atlassian this summer, which confirms and shows that digital transformation is accelerating. 78% claim that that they are planning on accelerating their digital efforts to transform business. 74% are thinking about becoming more agile to adopt changing business conditions, and 71% claim that they need to quickly introduce and will introduce new products and services to at least maintain their current market position. So really, what we're talking about here is that it's all about continuous and very fast change, and the fast pace of change has what we've seen a ripple effect in every corner of any enterprise. We call this adaptive delivery, the need for having end-to-end agility and an adaptive delivery becoming very, very important. And to achieve this type of adaptive delivery, many organizations have many organizations have embraced or plan to embrace agile software development. You can see that 55% in this survey told us that they are already adopting some form of agile development, and 21% plan to do so. But the interesting thing is that I don't think I think it's more aspirational, right? It's more aspirational than real. And why I say that is because if you look at these practices, we ask, what are the what development practices does your development team use? You can see that, still, and this is over 3,000 developers worldwide, and that are using, many types of practices. You can see that they're still struggling with adopting at 31% some of the practices down here, like continuous integration, formal code review, daily stand-up meetings are the top 3 things. But when you look at even more sophisticated practices like A/B or multivariate testing, or pair programming, or running retrospectives and defining minimum viable products, or some of the DevSecOps type of practices, it's even below the 25%. So that's why I think it's more aspirational than what people really claim to be. Another thing that kind of shows proves this a little bit is the delivery cadence has plateaued. What we've seen since 2014, and 2019 data is exactly the same, is that releasing once a month is basically 24 to 26% of the respondents will say that, and that's been going on for the last, as I said, the last 6 years, basically. Also, so I guess there is a point about this that I wanted to make, which is maybe we're asking the wrong question. Everybody is like focused on faster delivery and just measuring how fast can we deliver, and let's try to improve that speed, up to a week, or delivering weekly, or delivering daily, or delivering hourly. And really, maybe that's the wrong question, right? We're starting to think that maybe the right question is to ask organizations, what is the delivery cadence that your business really needs, right? Does it really need to deliver daily, or maybe delivering once a month is okay? That's just something to think about. So all in all, basically, that is the current state of the market is that only a third of all enterprises are being successful with agile transformation. And I guess the question is, what is holding us back, right? If only a third is really being successful in transforming to digital, that means that because application development and delivery is a key, a big enabler, there's something that probably we're either not doing or that is not working. Well, we know some of the things that hold us up, right? Operational legacy system problems, and we've been kind of updating and upgrading all the front end and mobile applications, if you will, but we haven't really modernized the back end. And the back end, when you don't modernize it, we know that back ends are so static and inflexible. You can't really change things very easily. Applications are siloed. Data on that back end is unreachable, but it's indispensable data, especially today with AI, where everybody needs lots of data. Those algorithms are, data hungry. We need to liberate that data from back-end systems, from our operational systems. And then there's growing technical debt, which is a very important concept, because what this means is that if a customer asks us to change something, or asks you to change something, your business asks you to change something or add something new, the time that you are delayed in delivering that new value, that new service, is it's equivalent to a financial debt, right? It's exactly the same proposition of financial debt. We get a loan from a bank, and we pay interest rates, and that interest rate gets higher and higher the longer the technical debt stays in the system. It's also, we still are very process-centric, right, over practices, although Agile is really not about processes. It's more about, it's a way of being, right? And but unfortunately, we tend to work still in siloed ways with a limited capability and collaboration when we don't really talk to each other enough and communicate enough. We are also forced to work on large batches, right? That's because we still think in terms of big releases rather than small features, especially the business, right? Business needs to think more in terms of minimum viable products, small features, so that we can have smaller batches of work, and it's easier to deal and manage smaller batches of work. It's more efficient, less prone risk to less prone to errors, if you will. And really what we're doing is, as I say, your clients are not being agile, they're really doing agile, which is again not understanding how agile is really more a framework, and it's a behavioral, it's a state of being, it's a way of being. And of course there are a set of good practices around it to implement, to kind of to improve things. And so really I think the problem is that Agile needs to be done right. And what do I mean by Agile done right? I guess, first of all, is no longer and not anymore an IT affair, right? And it's never really been. I mean, even if you look at Scrum, the concept of a product owner is exactly that, to bring the business in those delivery teams to to basically tell us exactly what to prioritize on from a business perspective. And so the business product owner has to be someone from the business, and it's even reaching other corners of the enterprise. As I mentioned at the beginning, it has a ripple effect everywhere, because you want also not just the business to be more agile and part of the game, but also agile teams need a new budget.
Actually a planning process for budgeting, and not just an approach that I still see happening, which is fighting just for money, and whoever makes whoever screams louder gets more money in their budget sometimes, right? It's a different approach. We'll talk about that in a minute. And then it really requires leadership to embrace and to lead the agile transformation. So just a bit of a deep dive onto that budgeting process I was talking about is really, you have to introduce this is a case where you do need a process, which basically starts from strategic direction setting, developing a strategic roadmap, which basically has roles from 12 to 18 months, and basically that gives input into a portfolio that gets prioritized properly with funding. And so basically that's when the planning starts, and you do that on a value stream by value stream basis, or think about a process that you want to improve or a new product. And for each value stream, you basically allocate the budget, and you measure the outcomes, and based on the outcomes you adjust also the funding. You adjust the roadmap and you adjust the funding. So it's a planning process more than just fighting around money and who can get more. And basically, you know, it becomes more evolutionary. The budget gets adjusted, the business funding gets adjusted, and as the project evolves. But it also means moving to the cloud, right? And I guess we're seeing this. You'll see some numbers in a minute. But the reason why I think moving to the cloud is important for adaptive delivery is the aspects that I'm interested in is because it really enables the decoupling and the decomposition of the architecture, which, you know, thanks to the technologies that are available on cloud, like containers and APIs, which are, you know, kind of two sides of the same coin with microservice architectures and even business services. Decoupling is very important, and breaking up into smaller chunks, as you will see in a minute, because that helps us reorganize and structure teams in a more flexible way that Agile really, really requires. And you can see that actually many organizations are already like, you know, leveraging, moving to the cloud to some degree, and 79% in a recent a survey that we did to responsible IT people from professionals on the operations side say yes, we are starting to leverage some of the public cloud services like the AWS, Azure, Google, or maybe even, you know, other cloud platforms. And so that's good, because I think it's one important step into the overall making of an adaptive delivery organization. Now, this is exactly why, you know, this, if you look at this third element down here, it's exactly, you know, where decoupling and having architecture that is modular is very important. So let me explain this slide a little bit better. Basically, there's three things that we see work really well to create these autonomous teams, integrated product teams, right? We want the team to be small. Okay, that's an agile, you know, practice. Squads, scrum teams, etc., maximum 8 to 10 people. But we also need to give these teams small work items, right? The small batches I was talking about, the minimum viable product approach. But for that to really happen, that can only happen if you have an underlying, you know, an underlying flexible architecture. That was why Amazon can deliver software every 11.3 seconds. They've got thousands of small teams working on microservices, and you can align these teams around that architecture. You can align that, you know, these teams around the architecture and business services in a much more flexible way if the architecture allows it. And so the concept of small is beautiful, I think, is very important for that adaptive delivery. Another important thing that I think some of these leading organizations do, and we need to do for becoming more adaptive and more agile, is we have to embrace the spirit, not just of agile, but also of DevOps. And I call it agile plus DevOps. But what I'm trying to say here in this specific slide is that agile and DevOps are kind of can be seen and should be seen by our executives and by, you know, because I think the technical people understand this, but you should show this as being two sides of the same coin, and you shouldn't be doing one without the other. In other words, if I want to drive that cool car and have that, you know, red Ferrari, have the experience of a Ferrari with great quality and speed, or whatever your best sports car might be, you know, in your minds, and have a great experience with that car, right? That's what agile development kind of does, right? It tears down the wall between business and developers. But on the other hand, it also, with DevOps, it tears down the wall between development and operations. And tearing down the wall between development and operations, it also provides an agile infrastructure. You need a safe and comfortable road to drive that Ferrari car, right? And you need to be able to run off the freeway if you're getting close to a huge city, right? So a scaled infrastructure to drive that red Ferrari car, and automation wherever it's needed. So the other last important thing about this is that you need a common language between the development teams and the operations teams. And so really what DevOps is about, and Agile plus DevOps is about, is a one journey, one transformation that is changing end to end, business involved, shared goals, common language, and automation. And that really leads us to an adaptive delivery. I could not, of course, avoid talking about culture. Actually, I think this is, if I had an opportunity, is where I would spend most of my time, but I don't have all that time today. But I did want to make sure that I brought this up, because when I ask customers, and I do these surveys every 2 years on the state of Agile, I've been doing it since now 10 years, and every 2 years when I do the state of Agile adoption in the marketplace, the number one impediment is culture and adoption of cultural behavior, right? Thinking about, how managers need to change from a cultural perspective, how the employees and collaboration needs to happen in a different way. The values and the principles all change. Now, I see a lot of interest around some of the, sometimes we kind of tend to think that we can copy something from someone else. I see that when I talk about, I did a lot of research around the Spotify engineering model. That was, kind of an approach, an operating model that's been very successful for Spotify, the music company. And so, I kind of get inquiries from clients that say, we want to do exactly, we want to be like that. We want to be like Spotify. Well, you can be inspired by what Spotify and what other companies adopting that model are doing, which I see. You should get inspired by that, right? It's an experimental approach, but don't think that you can easily copy something from someone else, right? So it's not about just copying. It really is about getting inspired, defining what type of culture in your organization you want, and then seeing what you need to do to get there. Another important area that I see organizations, that I think is needed to kind of complete this journey is you have to have some meaningful and measurable metrics and shared goals, as we said, but these metrics have to be able to help you align with the goals of the business, the goals of the stakeholders, the goals of the teams, and even the goals of the individuals. These 4 buckets of metrics, business value, quality, progress, and efficiency, are the top metrics that we see Agile organizations, Agile teams using successfully. So with a growth and a big focus on business value. Now, how do you measure business value? Well, it's not just, one way, a simple way that many use is net present score. But there's much more sophistication coming into this with analytics and being able to associate to a team that is, just delivering a great app to the business. Well, how is it helping the business increase sales, for example? And you can use that metric. Or how is it increasing those, that business division on onboarding clients faster? And we can measure that, right? There's lots of analytics tools. There's Tableau or Google Analytics, and some instrument the code to kind of identify business value. And then it's the typical quality metrics. It's the progress metrics with a big focus on, I've been seeing on flow these days, flow metrics, efficiency like mean time to repair. Now, the important thing about these metrics is that it's not, you should not treat them in a siloed way. They have to be somewhat connected. They have to be related, right? You don't want to see a metric on good progress of adopting Agile practices, but value is not increasing. Or you don't want just to increase efficiency, go faster, but you're not delivering enough business value, and so forth, right? So the relationship between these metrics is important. And some methodologies like OKRs and goal question metric help us tie the metrics and use the right metrics. And you don't need a sea of metrics. You just need the right ones that help you go towards being more adaptive, towards the goals, to the business goals that you are, going to be setting up with those methods that I commonly see adopted. There is one last thing that I want to talk about. So, all of those are good areas of focus to be able to be more, flexible in adapting to what's behind the corner and what your clients are going to be asking you in 12, 24 months from now, or even, in the future. But and it's making what you learn sustainable. So what do I mean by sustainable? Of course, it might mean for some, zero emissions, carbon emissions, but that's not what I really mean. What I mean is sustainable is being able to do what you're doing and what you're learning to do right now and keep doing it in the future without forgetting it or going back to old habits, old behaviors. I see this happening very frequently. I have clients that have reached out to me 7, 8 years ago that I was interviewing them. I was learning from them on how they were scaling Agile, large organizations. And some of them are still very successful. They've made, good transformation, but others come back after 5, 7 years. They come back with inquiries, and I'm kind of getting the impression that they're starting all over again. And that happens often, either because maybe the transformation leader left or the CIO left and he was the one driving this, or maybe sometimes it's happening at the teams levels because basically they bump into some big issue for deployment and delivery, and we all feel more comfortable going back to some of the old ways of working sometimes, although we know that that might not help us deliver. And so that's what I mean by sustainable, something that is future-proof, right? And is fit for the future, and it's future-proof. It won't go away. It doesn't change. If I'm learning how to do things in a great way, I don't want to change it back into an old way of working. So I think some of the things we talked about do this, but there's a couple of other that I want to mention that I think help us make it even more sustainable. One is, distributed agile, not co-located, coaching and training complemented with immersive experience, and having a much stronger alignment with CIOs and CEOs. Sorry, between the IT delivery organization, the CEO, and the IT executive boards. Let me just quickly share what I mean here. So first of all, this is really one thing that I think COVID is going to leave with us. I hear it on the news every day, even on the radio this morning. I live here in Italy, and they were talking about remote working becoming a reality. And really, I think COVID has changed a perception that was around some bad, myths about Agile. And one of the myths was that Agile only works with co-located team. That's up to some point, everybody was saying that. I was saying that too. That if you're co-located, it's better. But you know what? What we're proving is that even non-co-located works. I've seen my clients that were already fluent in Agile and that have been very successful even during the pandemic, right? So I think the new normal will be non-co-located. Remote working is kind of tied to the previous myth. And I think there's been a cultural challenge, right? Think about the Taylorist countries, or where there's a lot of Taylorism between the management that wants to see and control everybody because that's the way they work. Well, remote working is working. Productivity is actually kept high in many of those, in many organizations. I don't see really productivity being a problem anymore. And so I think the pandemic is going to help, if there's a good thing to say about the pandemic at all, but it is helping us move into this new state of mind where people are going to be working in a much more distributed way. Even after the pandemic, I think we think that still teams are going to be distributed. People are going to go back to the offices, but it's going to be a new world. It's going to be a new normal, a new distributed, way of working. And that's very important for Agile too, because it's kind of been a little bit of an impediment. And last but not least, to make this happen, right, it's because also the technologies are helping us get there. With Agile, if you're doing SAFe, you have these big room planning meetings, right, where you have 100, 150 people doing huge planning sessions where they need whiteboarding, where they need video conferencing and collaboration. Well, this is what we're doing right now, right? There's hundreds of people here listening to me. We're going to be discussing in a minute, but in the big room planning sessions with tools that are helping you do the whiteboarding and the planning, that's very important. And as a matter of fact, we think this is an area of huge growth, right? Where physical forms of collaboration are being replaced by digital forms of collaboration. We're also seeing that employees want to work from new locations, from anywhere actually, and be able to still achieve the same successful goals. So doubling down on this technology is a very important step. So that was the number one that I think is going to make it even more sustainable. Number two is introducing this concept of immersive experience. This is not going to replace agile coaching, or actually, on top of the agile coaching that you've done, the normal training that you do just in time, there's this concept of an immersive experience, which is having a lab set up, or a garage, as IBM calls it, or the Pivotal Labs calls it labs, and Collaboratories is Cognizant, just to give some examples of these concrete things, of where you create an environment and you've got the right tools and you've got the coaches and you've got the whole team there working in this new way, right? This is at the team level, where you want to basically run them through this immersive experience with a precise cadence. And so that they keep getting updated, and every time they go back into this immersive training, which might be for a sprint or for 2 sprints, depends how you organize it, they get new goals and new goals of learning new, more advanced practices, and keep moving forward, rather than just having training once and then start doing agile and then forgetting about keeping up with the concepts behind agile. Because of that risk of going back to old behaviors, they need to be reminded about why they're working in a different way, but also having the right coaches on side by side, teaching a developer to kind of use in a much more sophisticated way A/B testing, for example, or the product owner how to really focus on minimum viable products. And it's the entire team together. This is the last point about the executive board, the alignment between CEO and executive boards. I think this is very important. We've seen now, even the big 5 consulting companies are now working with CIOs, helping them understand, that agile is important, and they write about it too, which is great. I like that. But the point is that is sharing the business goals with the IT leadership, and it's really about, if this boils down to one thing. I think what we're trying to say here is that CEOs and executive boards need to understand, have to have a very clear understanding of the delivery capabilities they have. They need to understand how adaptive their organization is in terms of delivery, right? Can I really move fast and help my business and adjust to the business goals and priorities in a very adaptive way? Well, to do that, we know that investments are required. We know that the funding models have to change. We know that the way we organize budgets have to change. These are issues that CEOs, have to know and have to be sympathetic with, right? And so basically, but on the other hand, in order to achieve that, the IT leadership will still have to be very adherent to and accountable to adherence to the goals and the commitments that they make. They have to be very transparent and disciplined, as they are. But we really think that there needs to be an extra effort here in tying more clearly the goals and shared values between the higher up managers, executives of an organization, and the delivery organization itself. And so at the end, it really is about if there's a takeaway from what I've told you and I've shared with you, is that to be true adaptive, you have to have agile working at the team level. You have to have agile working at the enterprise level. You have to scale agile. Everybody talks about that, but it really means working on these 6 levers, right? I talked about culture. I talked a little bit about talent, but I talked about structure, metrics, practices, and technology. These are the 6 levers that you really need to double down on, that will help you become more of an adaptive delivery organization. And I just want to end with this statement: it's not magic. It might look like magic for you, but it isn't. We know that. I realize that, but it is hard work. And I think it's something that you can do, because 30% of organizations are being successful with this. And so, I would say either re-energize your programs if you're in the middle of one, start one to transform to more an adaptive delivery organization if you haven't. And with that, I thank you for your for listening. I will answer some questions now for about 5 minutes. I'll still be here, and I hope you enjoy the rest of this event. There's lots of interesting speeches that go deeper into some of the areas that I talked about. Thank you very much. Bye-bye.